We made it here on a Thursday. We're happy to have you. We're starting off cold because, well, something happened here in the last week that has gotten all of our attention across the globe, as by now you would have heard that there has been an assassination attempt on the President of the United States, or sorry, the previous but front runner for President of the United States and President Donald J. Trump. And big things have happened since then. Today, we're going to be covering those issues more so from the perspective of there's nothing new that we're going to be presenting today, but we will be talking about what we do know now and what that means for the United States moving forward here going into an election season, what that means for us here in Canada, and what that means for our politicians here north of the border. We're looking forward to doing this, making sure we are informing you the best we can, and it all starts now.
Innovation is in our veins. Soon the whole world will know our names. Sharing our knowledge and freedom reign. We here for the people, you know it's our way. Setting foundations is part of the dream. It doesn't matter if you're new to the game. Listen up now, cause we all gon' say, elevate, 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 higher, elevate, 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 higher. We gon' rise up, we all gon' shine. Work through adversity, stay on the grind. Elevate, elevate, this is our time. Elevate, elevate.
Welcome to the Elevate Podcast, everyone. It's so great to have you all on one more time. It's your boy Josh.
And Reg.
And we're grateful to be back on with you yet again. There's so much to get into today. Well, obviously so much that is, well, things are shocking the world today this week, and we're looking forward to getting into all of it and informing you the best we can. We obviously talked about the assassination attempt on Donald J. Trump. We also will be talking about different things happening with, Pierre Poilievre meeting with the First Nations at the First Nations Assembly. We'll be having Jennifer L. join us to discuss that. And then so much more as well. Jagmeet wanting to put a price cap on food. This and so much more. Reg, how you feeling, big dog?
Doing good. I have to kind of acknowledge, like last week, I think I was down. I was kind of dealing with a lot of stuff in my personal life. Just like there was bills that were coming that were larger than I was expecting. There was a pool that you helped put together that was not coming together. And so there's a lot of things that were kind of going down. And I think that reflected in just kind of like the news that we were reporting, because I was just like, man, everything that we're reporting really sucks. And everything's really crappy right now. And I'm feeling good this week because those bills that were kind of surmounting to a couple of things like that all got taken care of and worked out in the end. The pool's looking great.
Hey, let's go.
It's getting filled slowly but surely with a garden hose.
Still not done?
All 66,000 liters of it, So little by little, we had to drain it and redo it.
Oh, that's why.
Anyway, so it was a time. But things are coming up aces, so I'm feeling a lot better this week. So a little more cheerful in what we have to share. And there's been some cool things that have happened as well. Big things, as you already mentioned, which we'll get into, but some little tidbits that I'll share in the news that I thought was kind of a win for people that we really need.
For sure. Absolutely. There's, as much as it's been a heavier week news-wise this past week, there's also been some great positives that obviously have been overshadowed, which makes sense, that are positive things that are happening here in Canada on a provincial level, across the country, as well on the federal level. There's some cool things happening. And so we can rest assured the idiots are not going to win. I'll leave it at that. But yeah, I think is really interesting. The whole situation happened this past Saturday with Donald Trump getting his ear blown off was fascinating. Because the one weekend where I decide to go away and turn off my phone is the weekend where this all happens. And I didn't hear about it until Sunday morning. So the next day, 12 hours later. And I was like, admittedly, my emotions, I was confused at how I was feeling. Because I felt guilty of how I felt. Because I was like, yeah. Anyone's been following this stuff for any amount of time. We knew this was coming. At some point, nothing was stopping this man, so they were going to have to try and kill him. Simply put. So, was I surprised? No. Was I shocked? Yes. I was not happy to hear this. We were all of maybe 4 centimeters away from all chaos breaking loose in the States. And that, my friends, is absolutely terrifying. I do not take this lightly. There's people who do take it lightly, and I challenge them to actually stop and think about how serious this really is. This was not a joke. Making jokes about Donald Trump being a convicted felon is not a joke. These are some different things that we need to have serious conversations about. And first things first, Josh, you seem to be making a lot of assumptions off the top, as I know some of you are feeling. Here's what happened. We know that there was at least, when we first news came out, this happened, we knew that Secret Service knew for about 2 minutes of what was about to happen, and still shots got off on Donald Trump. That was weird. Interesting. 2 minutes, that's a lot of time in security world when you know something's about to happen. Then you end up finding out 26 minutes beforehand that officers on the ground ran into the individual 26 minutes before shots were fired. He pointed a gun at officers and they backed down. Nothing. Secret Service beforehand didn't think to cover the rooftop that this man was shooting from. That was weird. When they always cover rooftops at anything. Weird. Then you end up finding out they knew about this man an hour before any shots were fired. He was addressed as someone who was suspicious, who was walking around the area with a rangefinder. Nothing happened. No, leave Trump on the off stage. None of this. Something weird happened that day. And the left, the psychotic left, will say that it was staged. And that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. And I'll explain here very shortly why I feel that way. It's more so that this, I truly believe, was an inside job. And this has gotten more serious than people even realize. And that, my friends, is what was concerning of what happened this past Saturday. More news has arisen. More news has come to fruition. And people need to take seriously what's happening politically in both the US, Canada, and throughout the West. It seems like there has been an attack on any leaders fighting against the NATO agenda. Slovakia's president shot 5 times, managed to survive. The Hungarian president had two attempts on his life, trying to get him killed. What was the thing that these guys had in common? Oh, they wanted to stop funding Ukraine and they wanted to have a peaceful end to the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. That's weird. That's interesting. Now we have Donald Trump, who has his own bucket of issues that people don't like about him. But again, he has that in common with these 2 other individuals. Wants that fight to end in Russia and Ukraine. And right at the moment, we saw the funniness that happened in the election in 2020. And it seems like Trump's, like Poilievre here over Trudeau, his lead keeps growing and growing and growing. The margin is so big now, there is no amount of election interference that can make up for a Democrat win. So what's next? They tried to jail him, didn't work. Tried to seize his assets, didn't work. Now they're going to try and kill him. And I truly, truly believe that. And I'll leave it up to you, Red. You can ask any and all questions. I'm open to answering them. I am so ready to have this conversation. But I truly believe that is what's happening right now. And it's anybody. This is just history of the United States. Anybody or a presidential candidate or someone who ended up becoming president tries to shake up anything in Washington, D.C., winds up finding themselves dead or someone tries to take their life. That is concerning, and that is what happened. I truly believe happened this past Saturday.
See, for me, I look at it and I'm like, I don't think you're wrong on that. I don't know how much of an inside job it is. That's my own take. But my thought is that I do think people were lax on purpose in the sense that it was kind of like, oh, we'll see how this plays out. We might not be actively supporting this to happen so much as like we didn't put the gun in the person's hand. We didn't, tell them to do that. But maybe we'll turn a blind eye for a little bit and see what happens. That's kind of where I look at it, and that's where I think it's sitting. The big thing that I had the biggest concern with was the fact that the way it was reported and the way people responded, to me, that was the part that really, really, I couldn't believe that this was actually done. I see that you've got like the articles there, because like I was doing the same thing. I was just scrolling through how it was being reported and how the left was actually saying this was happening. Like, this is literally history being written as we're speaking. And I'm like, how could you get it so wrong? And history will look back on this and like criticize the media for how they reported this. Yeah, the Washington Post, Trump escorted away after loud noises at rally. Are you kidding me? He was shot in the freaking ear. And like the amount of people, even there's like a TikToker, he does this like news updates for real guy. And he's like, yeah, I think it's all a hoax and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, first off, if you're a wealthy individual and you want to plan your own fake assassination, you're not shooting your own damn ear off. Maybe you get shot in the arm or something, like, you know what I mean? Or maybe you don't get shot at all. You get shot at, and the person beside you dies because you're rich and you're wealthy and you don't care about human life. You don't get your ear taken off. Like, this is what I'm saying, like, ridiculous. And then, yeah, Secret Service rushes Trump off stage after popping noises. Trump removed from stage by Secret Service after loud noises startles former president. Like, there was even one, I think, I don't know if you have it on there, but probably there was one that was like, Trump falls over at rally, and they show the picture of the Secret Service, like, kind of guarding him from any other bullets. And I'm like, he falls over? Are you kidding me?
Right.
Like, what? And so this, to me, these are the things that are most concerning for me right now, because I look at this and I go, there's been other assassination attempts on other presidents before. I do think that this one is special in the sense that, like you said, they have tried everything. And I know I was talking to one of our listeners because we've become really good friends. And I said to him, I was like, they've made a martyr out of him is what they've done. And then even just some of the headlines being like, a registered Republican or state registered Republican. And we know that what was happening was that there was a certain amount of Democrat voters that were actually registering as Republican voters to try and keep Donald Trump from winning. Mm-hmm. They were trying to actually infiltrate the Republican Party and change who was going to be the next candidate. And so, sure, you could have registered, but then when you actually follow the money, you see that he donated to the Democrat Party and to Democratic causes. It's like, that's the intention. So what if he joined the Republican Party for whatever reason? Also, maybe he wasn't trying to infiltrate like who was going to become leader. Maybe the fact that he can vote Republican in his state and vote Democrat for his president, because they have the same rules there as they do in Canada, where actually they have better rules around that because we can't vote for our leader, but we can vote differently. If you want to vote for Daniel Smith in Alberta and you really love Jagmeet Singh, you can vote for him too in your federal election, right? Which would mean that you'd be registered as a conservative voter in Alberta, but nationally an NDP. So you could do the same thing there. But it's the fact that they're trying to paint Republicans as these gun-wielding crazies when every indication shows that this was a Democratic voter that then went to take out this would-be president.
Republican frontrunner. Yep.
You know what I mean? Like, it's just, it's wild. And to me, like I said, it's the response from the media. And I forget who was actually calling it out. They said, do you think that maybe calling somebody a Nazi enough in the media might say that somebody would go, you know, like, if we would have just given a bullet to Hitler, then maybe we could have saved so many lives. Like, you know what I mean? Like, when you're putting somebody on that level of evil, you're basically saying open Pandora's box and allow for anything to happen because it's justified. Yeah. And this is what I'm seeing. I blame the media for a lot of this. And I blame the Democratic Party for the rhetoric that you're using. And when I look at the Canadian political system, I see the same thing happening. When they keep using words like far right to describe somebody who's going, maybe we should put a limit on the immigration crisis that we have right now because we can't house everyone. And they're like, racist, evil, worst. Like, you know what I mean? You take a deranged person and they're like, maybe we should eliminate this politician. Mm-hmm. This is where I am worried about the state of our democracy. And I think that, like you said, it is a really serious conversation that needs to be had. And I think that there needs to be some level of accountability that the media takes for this, mm-hmm. and that the parties take for this, for such divisive rhetoric and inappropriately applying labels. You can't call people Nazis and then wonder why you get crazies coming out of the woodwork and start taking matters into their own hands. Like, this is what I couldn't believe. And then I know like Jennifer L talked about it. I think Reality Shannon actually talked about it. A few others also talked about it online. Just the rhetoric coming out of would-be educated people in upper echelons of society. So we're talking about the BC professor. We're talking about thought leaders getting out there and going, damn, I really wish they would have killed someone.
Yeah.
Like, what have we become?
Mm-hmm.
I hate Trudeau. I don't wish death on Trudeau.
Yeah.
I would never wish that, because as soon as we do that, we failed. Mm-hmm. Our system has failed.
Yep.
And I look at that and I was absolutely disgusted. I looked at the assassination attempt and said, I was not shocked by it. I said, you know what? I saw that coming.
Yeah.
Because like you said, they tried every other method and it did not work. It just kept emboldening him more and making him more likable by the people because they felt that he's being persecuted, and everyone loves an underdog. I don't know why they're not getting this. Mm-hmm. They just keep throwing things at him and he keeps dodging it. And they're like, why isn't this working? I'm like, you idiots.
Yeah, it's pretty simple at this point. Yeah, I think that's where I guess the concern is moving forward. This is the point they've gotten to. So now we're at the point of like, this is as far as you, like, this is like the most extreme you can get to now, is trying to kill somebody.
Yeah.
And the concern that people have, conversations that are happening now, is I think there'll be one or two more attempts. We already heard of the guy who had the AK-47 at the RNC in Milwaukee. The day after, 2 days after this, or sorry, it would have been 4 days after this transpired. Like, this is going to happen more. And that is more so what the concern is at this point. And the other part, I think, what I've been hearing is I think racialized minority groups need to keep their head on a swivel. And I hate to say it, because I think that's the next step. False flag events. Someone shoots up a black church. Someone shoots up, a perceived minority group and labels it as a Trump supporter did it, to then gain more favor away from Trump. I think that's going to happen. And I hate it. I think it sucks because people are going to be used as pawns in this game, and people's lives are going to be absolutely changed. It already happened the day Trump was shot. Missed him, hit someone behind him. Now a family's up without a father. Real people are dying, and that's the other reason I thought the stupidness of the left saying this was staged. Someone died.
Yeah.
Are you dumb? No, for real. Are you dumb? Because that's ridiculous. Let's apply the same thought process to the Sandy Hook shooting. You're literally saying someone dying was a hoax. Someone got sued billions of dollars for saying that. Are you next now? Stupidness.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's absolutely ridiculous. And the fact that, like you said, somebody died. Like, where is the concern? Like, the people wishing death on another person and disregarding the death of a person. Like, it just, where is the egalitarian left in this, where they are supposed to be so beyond this horrible behavior that, like, this is the far right? Like, for all the things that I've read about what far right is supposed to be and why it's so evil, this is what it sounds like. So take a look in the mirror, because I don't think you'll like what's looking back, because it's looking pretty ugly.
Absolutely. And I think, sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, and also when you were talking about the racialized groups, did you see that article that they had to retract from the New York Times?
Yeah.
For those who didn't get to see it, because they tried to remove it quickly, basically saying that this was all a ploy so that Trump could appeal to African-American voters. I was like, are you freaking serious? Really?
Yeah.
And like, the black community down there lost it, rightfully so.
They should.
I was like, that's the most racist thing I've seen in a while. Mm-hmm. And you're supposed to be, they accept everyone. Screw racism. I'm having a really, really hard time with a lot of this, in the sense that it's doublespeak, it's Orwellian, mm-hmm. and like I've read this before. Go read 1984, Animal Farm, George Orwell. Like, they're literally taking pages from his books and
Absolutely.
living them out in real life. If you haven't read those, go read them. It's scary how similar it is.
Yeah, white liberals, you know, I should say white leftists are incredibly racist. Incredibly racist. And they will and should be called out for it. And that was another scenario. A bunch of lefties at New York Times posting that trash. Ridiculous. However, in the same breath, shout out 50 Cent. Many men wish death upon me. Yeah. Saw that. That was hype. That was hype.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that has been the joke. However, that has been the joke. Coming from, you know, I've been seeing on TikTok is just this brother's been, you know, wrongfully accused, tried to be jailed. He's got his mugshot. He's gotten arrested. Now he's got shot. And like, yo, this guy's, it's just crazy. And that was the one thing was I was listening to an interview and they were talking to Trump pretty soon after all this happened when he got shot. And they were begging him like, please do not go to Milwaukee for the RNC. Like take a week and just stay away. And Trump's exact words were, F that, I'm not a pussy.
Yeah.
Like I don't think I'm a tough guy, if I'm being honest. I'm pretty soft, if I'm being real. There's no way. Like, if I got shot, if I saw bullets even traveling 100 yards within me, I'm like, see ya, I'm out. I'm not going back into the lion's den and be like, here we go. I'm not standing up on my two feet and going, fight. Like, I'm not doing that. I'm like his one of the Secret Service agents ducking for fire. Oh no!
There's a really bad meme where it shows like the Secret Service guys like covering him over, and the Secret Service lady like a couple feet away hiding, and they were like the pay gap, and they showed like I was like, ooh, the people are gonna get in so much trouble for that one.
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely.
But it's so I look at this and I say that there's a really serious concern here that we need to address and take seriously. At the same time, you can't let the left and the media and all these individuals who are running with the story and creating their own narrative take joy away from what's happening, because honestly, at the same time, as horrific as this is and as terrible as this is, the fact that people are being strong and having courage and standing up for what they believe in while bullets are flying, I think that's incredible. Absolutely. I really I applaud that fortitude, and I think that like I wish all the best to those people, and I hope that they're safe, and I hope that this doesn't happen anymore, because I think that they don't deserve it.
Absolutely. And I think at the same time too, seeing Trump do what he did immediately after this, I think galvanized a lot of people that they were able to see strength and leadership they haven't seen in a long time.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I actually was listening to the Dire CEO podcast, and he was talking to Simon Sinek. And one of the things that Simon Sinek was saying was, he said, we're living in a time of weak leadership and purposelessness. And he said that, with the, we've realized that religion isn't its end all be all thing. But what he was saying was that we need strong leaders to stand up and to have purpose and to give people the ability to have and feel purpose. And I think that for everything that Trump is, like, he's definitely not a perfect person and has made his blunders, but he's a strong leader. And I think that's what people are craving. And that's why we're seeing like the support for Poilievre and the support for Trump, is because people are tired of the doublespeak. They're tired of the gaslighting. They're tired of people up there who run to Tofino when, you've promised the Indigenous folks that you're going to do something and you hide. Or when the truckers come and they rally at your door and you hide because you have COVID. Put on a damn mask and come out and talk. Somebody getting shot in the ear and their life almost being taken, and they stand up and like put their fists in the air. That's strong leadership. People can see that. They can smell that. They understand that. There's authenticity to that. And people crave that. They crave strong leadership, because like weak leaders create uncertain times. And that is the last thing that people want, is more uncertainty.
Absolutely.
So I go listen to the episode with Simon Sinek, because it's really interesting. And they talk about friendship, leadership, and purpose. But like, it felt so relevant to the fact that like, yeah, we are craving that right now. And when whoever took that picture, like, they're going to get stupid money.
That photographer's doing well. That photographer's doing well.
Yeah. But like, what an iconic photo. We'll be seeing that photo till we die.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because that was history right there, which was really selfishly a really cool thing to be living through, to be a part of that historic moment.
I couldn't agree more. And, you know, we'll kind of focus our eyes here to Canada, where Pierre Poilievre tweeted out immediately, kind of when all this kind of took place. He says, "I condemn in the strongest of terms the attempted murder of former President Trump today. I am relieved he is safe. My prayers are with other innocent people harmed or killed by this heinous act. I am also happy that the suspected shooter is dead. Democracy must prevail." I would say it's a pretty good statement put out by, I believe, our future prime minister. The left is psychotic. They ran with this. And obviously the leader of the psychos, Vicky Campbell, retweeted this and says he's glad the suspected quote-unquote shooter is dead. Poilievre has something seriously wrong with his head. His tweet should be reported for glorifying death. These people, I have to be paid by Trudeau. Just, I don't know how in your right mind you can think that's a smart thing to put out. This person lives in Southern Ontario, right around where all the smart people are supposed to live. Idiots. All of them. Morons. And Poilievre was then questioned in an interview about his rhetoric. Now it's like, oh, you saw what happened to President Trump. Do you think about trying to dim down, try to settle the rhetoric in Parliament? And this was his response to all that.
There will be people, I mean, they'll text me now and say, well, what about Poilievre? What are you going to do? I mean, using words like wacko, whatever, to come after your...
First of all, let's be very clear. My criticisms of the Prime Minister have been entirely reasonable and focused on his policy agenda. We are not going to censor ourselves now. We're not going to allow this shooter to shut down our debate. My criticisms of Justin Trudeau doubling housing costs, putting in a 61% carbon tax, driving 2 million people to a food bank, unleashing crime and chaos in our communities, that criticism will continue. It is my job. And I will not, this debate is not, this kind of incident is not going to shut down our democracy and force us into a self-censorship. When the worst thing that could happen is if we become country the dictatorial countries where no one's allowed to criticize the leadership, and we're not going to do that. I will continue to do my job, which is to hold the government accountable, including the Prime Minister, for the damage that he's doing in people's lives. That is my job, and that will not stop.
I mean, people are even offended that you mentioned that the killer was dead. Was shot and killed. That you were glad to see shot and killed. I'm not sure what's the offense is, but
what would they say? Did they think he should be alive? I don't know what they're offended about.
I don't know. Maybe they just think that you shouldn't be saying stuff like that.
Why?
I don't have an issue with it. I mean, he tried to kill the president. He did kill another man. And he tried to kill two other people.
He killed another human being. I don't care what you think about President Trump, former President Trump. The reality is he's a human being, and so was the other innocent victim who died here, heroically protecting his loved ones.
Yeah, totally agree. And like that's my thought is like, I don't care what you think about Trump. Do I think Trump's like the next best thing since sliced bread? No, I don't.
I thought he was Gandhi.
But you know what I mean? Like I don't care. What I care about is the fact that somebody tried to kill him, ended up killing another innocent person, critically injuring another person, that they're in hospital still. Like, yeah, how could you not want that threat taken out? Mm-hmm. I don't know. If that was your family member who died, would you be there going, I hope that they get the rehabilitation that they need to understand the wrongs that they've done. Maybe you are the next Gandhi and that's how you feel. Good for you. That's not me. I don't think that's the general population either. And so for people to get up in arms over that, I'd be just like, what is this deflection? Like,
It's crazy.
why are we focusing in on, why don't we look at the fact that we have a group of people who are labeling others as ultimate evil, and then we're all supposed to be surprised when shots ring out.
Yeah.
And when I look at our current parliament in Ottawa right now, and I say, who is slinging the most mud here? Because you watched what happened in that interview. He even said he stuck to his talking points. Like, I'll give him that like political training right there. He was like, no, he's like the food banks, the crime, he was labeling out all the things that were happening. And that's what he does. And then you get Trudeau and Freeland and whoever else up there, Freeland mentioning makeup and Trudeau talking about how he's bringing these evil far right policies. And like, you know what I mean? There's all this like personal attack happening on Poilievre all the time. Like, I can't stand it. And then when you wonder like, well, why are these bad things happening? It's like, because you have a leader who knows that they're in the wrong, don't have anything to back it up, and instead will either not answer the questions or go to personal ad hominem attacks. Yeah. And then everybody's surprised when you've, painted somebody and a whole group of people as just the worst thing, as racist, white supremacists, Nazis, and you wonder why people would attack them.
Yeah.
Like, it's right there.
Absolutely. And the last thing I'll say before we finish this off is, right now this episode will have released on a Thursday morning. I implore you tonight, this Thursday night, watch the RNC, watch Trump's address. The fact that he is reported to have changed his whole speech after what just happened. And I have a feeling it's going to be a very unifying message, because this is his opportunity to finally unite the country after this. Mm-hmm. I really think he will. Just keep an eye out. It'll be interesting.
It will be interesting, and something I'm going to be watching.
Absolutely. Likewise,
watch
brother.
Party.
Yeah, seriously. But we mixed up the order a little bit just because that was really important. But Reg, what's in the news?
I feel like those reporters that you see on TV, they're like, and a whole family and 2 children were slaughtered today. And now to how you can bake a cake in 5 seconds. Yeah. Like, you know what I mean? Like, just so ridiculous. So take a breath, take a moment. That was a lot to digest. I know we threw some heavy topics out there. But as promised, there is some 5-minute cakes that you can bake here, because one of the things I wanted to bring up that I thought was really, really cool, maybe we'll talk to Jen about it later, but we'll see, was the fact that Saskatchewan's actually winning their fight against the carbon tax. Yeah. So if anybody remembers, basically Premier Moe, he was like, this is not fair that natural gas, which is the primary heating fuel in Saskatchewan for homes there, is not being given the same carve out that oil is being given. Natural gas is produced in Canada, oil that's being imported from elsewhere. Seems stupid. But he actually won the injunction against the CRA, who tried to take $28 million out of the Saskatchewan bank accounts. And he won because basically they said it's unconstitutional for the federal government to come in and try and take that money from us. And so, yeah, exactly. And then he also had another lawsuit out saying that the whole carbon tax was unconstitutional. So he had 2 basically going out. So this was supposed to appear before the courts. The federal government and the provincial government in Saskatchewan basically signed an agreement saying that we'll pay you half of the amount or we'll guarantee payment of half the amount that you think that we owe you if this doesn't go our way. But until then, we're going to pursue this to the courts. We'll drop the lawsuit against the CRA, and we'll just stick to just fighting the carbon tax itself. And we'll take this to court. There's been no court date set as of yet, but basically Moe's come out and said, like, we'll wait on this and we'll hold this and we'll see what happens with the next leader that comes into power. Because I think he's right. Yeah. Basically what will happen is this will get drug out to a point where Saskatchewan won't pay. This bill will just keep racking up, and then Poilievre will get in there and be like, that's the tax. Yeah. And then it will be a non-issue. Yeah. So win for Saskatchewan, win for your premier. Like, we need to see more leadership like that. Love to see it. good for you, Saskatchewanians. What are you, Saskatchewaners? Like, they are winners.
They are winners. I'm not even going to pretend to know what that answer is.
Yeah. So, how they're not winning though. So out west, I feel for you folks. 9,000 of you evacuated due to wildfires. Don't let everybody tell you that this is climate change, because they will try their darndest to try and justify their carbon tax that is not helping as a way to combat the wildfires. But yeah, basically we're looking at 3,500 people in Fort Nelson, the Northern Rockies Regional Municipality in Fort Nelson First Nation also issuing joint statements on the fact that they just don't have the emergency preparedness to combat this. So multiple wildfires in Alberta, a lot around Fort McMurray, 700 people in northern Manitoba evacuated, and then also the Fond du Lac Denisulan First Nation in northern Saskatchewan also being evacuated. So folks all across those prairie provinces and even into BC. So if you're in those provinces and this is something you're dealing with, we're keeping an eye out and we're watching, and we hope that this gets resolved soon and that you're safe. So something else that was kind of good for the prairies, Calgary Stampede hit an all-time record, or got very close to their all-time record. So their all-time record was basically their 100-year celebration. They brought in 1.4 million people. So they're saying they got 1.33 million Stampeders at the Calgary Stampede, which was basically, barring the 100-year celebration, was the all-time record.
Wow.
So good for them.
That's awesome.
It's enough that Truro, Nova Scotia is like, we need a Stampede.
Dude, that's just crazy. Tell me more about this, dude.
So basically,
Nova Scotia Stampede.
Yeah, Nova Scotia Stampede. It's something that they're going to try out, and they basically have said that, Nova Scotia has a long historic farming community, that they basically have ties to the same kind of lifestyle and values that the Calgary Stampede has. So they want their own. And so this is something that's actually been in the works for a while. So they're going to have musical acts. They're going to have showings, livestock. They're going to do the whole thing. Gee. So Nova Scotia's doing their own little stampede this September.
All right.
So
okay, Nova Scotia. Gee.
So if you want to look it up, you can actually just find it by Googling the Nova Scotia Stampede. So it's happening in Bible Hill, which is the community right next to Truro. So it's happening in September. I'd love to see it.
I'm going.
Yeah.
I'm going.
Yeah,
I'm sold.
I'll go with you.
I'm sold.
I was a little bit sad that I didn't go to the Calgary one. I didn't have the time nor the money, but Calgary one, they had the Hunter Brothers play, and they're a band that I love to listen to.
Nice.
Their song Hard Dirt was actually my most listened to song.
Despite
Spotify last year. So... But yeah, the other thing I'll bring up, though, is that was kind of funny. Trudeau holding that meeting with NATO. I don't know if you guys saw this, but
wild.
empty chairs everywhere. I don't know. And it's funny because you can see him doing, basically people are taught to pan the room when they're speaking in public. And he's panning this room, going back and forth like, blah, 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 Canada, we support Ukraine, and we love NATO, and even though we're not giving the right amount of money, we still think we're okay. And he's like panning the room, looking back and forth, and it's just empty chairs everywhere. And at the very beginning of the video too, it's just like they start at the end of the room and it's completely empty, and then they zoom in to try and like just hide the fact that all the chairs are empty.
Totally. Well, actually, in that vein, I'm curious, what are your thoughts on, him getting essentially his booty slapped by NATO by needing to make sure we increase to 2% for security?
I think it makes sense. I think that NATO, and the problem that people are not understanding is people are looking at this and going, what do you mean we have to pay NATO 2%? It's like, no, that's not. And like the worst part was that some of these comments came from folks within the forces themselves. I was like, oh no.
No way, really?
Oh yeah. Oh. Like it was just like, oh, that's a rough look.
Yeah.
And so which is why I think the forces need more money.
True.
But basically what this is agreement is supposed to be is that Canada would spend 2% of its GDP on its own military, so that in the horrible event that we need to be called up to support, that we actually have the military capabilities to support. So that means 2% to go towards enrollment in the military, new supplies, new technology, and basically making sure that we're well armed to take care of ourselves so that we're not left in the lurch or leave our allies in the lurch.
Yep.
It's not a payment of 2% of our GDP to other people or to the NATO organization itself.
Or to Klaus Schwab.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Which honestly isn't, I understand where people went there because it's not out of the realm of possibility of happening, but no, this has like been happening for decades now at this point. So yeah, that's kind of how this all works.
Yeah, exactly. But the other thing too is that basically they asked Poilievre, they're like, what do you think of all this? Are you going to implement? And he's like, Canada's broke.
We have nothing.
We got no money right now. He's like,
We have no GDP.
He's like, I'm inheriting a mess of a financial state for a country. And he's like, we've got to do some work on getting ourselves back into good financial standing before we can make those investments in the military. He was like, I want to get there and it's going to be a priority for me. He's like, but priority number one is kind of fixing the state that we're at financially.
Absolutely.
And I have to say I agree. And honestly, giving another $500 million to Ukraine.
Shout out Ukraine.
Not how we're going to get there.
It's crazy, dude.
Thanks,
crazy.
Trudeau.
We love to see it. Surprise. Yes, we have Jennifer L. on with us, and we're super excited to have her on. We'll be talking about what happened at AFN and the reaction of the First Nations Assembly to Pierre Poilievre and how the relationship that's happening there, and really kind of get an Indigenous perspective on this, who's really engaged with the community and what's happening between the political world and then Indigenous affairs and how those two worlds come together. Jennifer, great to have you on. How you holding up?
I'm good. I'm going to pretend that we didn't just go through my entire life story over the last 45 minutes.
No, it's all good. Yeah. Joe, no, we're super stoked to have you on. But that like there was some, headlines that came out of that really, sparked a lot of interest for people. The one that really stood out to people, we'll get into obviously the nuances of the conversations that took place, but the one that really stood out was two leaders standing up and turning their backs on while Pierre Poilievre was speaking. What happened there from your perspective and, happening, from the community's perspective, and then also how Pierre Poilievre was trying to address the situation?
Well, we had witnessed Pierre Poilievre attend AFN in person for the very first time since ever, but especially since becoming a leader. Stephen Harper did not attend AFN, so this was actually kind of a monumental moment for the Conservative Party. But at the same time, it was obviously going to be something that everybody had their eyes on because of the relationship between nations across the country and political parties, but more specifically the Conservative Party. And Jagmeet Singh was also there to speak, but there was a really mixed reaction with Pierre. I was actually watching it live, waiting to do CBC National. So I was watching it as it was going down, and I was live tweeting. And so at first, I hadn't actually seen that anyone had turned their back. All I could hear from my screen was the applause because I was watching CBC's feed. And I had heard applause and I was like, oh, that's interesting, right? So then I go on to film CBC and I had tweeted, like live tweeting as I'm doing this. And I said, very much different approach this year. Like we're hearing applauses to Pierre Poilievre and I'm tweeting this and we're filming CBC and she says same thing, like quite the different reaction this year. And then afterwards it came out that actually, if you were in the room, you could see that there were multiple chiefs and proxies that had turned their back on him. And apparently it had to do with his stance on parental rights is what I was told. And then I also was told that the proxies and chiefs that did turn their back had received the blessing and the guidance from the people on their communities, including elders and knowledge keepers. So a little bit of a unique situation over there.
Absolutely.
What does this mean for like the relationship going forward then? I mean, obviously turning your back is quite a statement. Is there some way that he can kind of bridge that gap so he can show good faith?
I think one of the really unique things about government is that while we are actively under the Indian Act, we essentially have no choice but to work with them as nations until you reach full sovereignty and remove yourself from the Indian Act. So it's like you can turn your back and be upset, but at the same time, there's going to be a lot of crossover where our people, especially members, need to deal with the federal government on a number of issues. So I kind of see both sides, where I follow obviously a lot of fellow Indigenous people, and some of them were saying like, this isn't going to help us with collaboration. What is this going to look like for our communities now? If the relationship is already bad, is Pierre even going to be willing to sit down with these leaders? Will he talk to them? Like, what does that actually look like? And I am very pro sovereignty and very pro nations holding up their right to feel the way that they feel. And that might sound really weird coming from me, especially as someone that exists in politics. I have to walk in two worlds where I exist in politics, but that is why I don't tell anyone who to vote for, because I truly believe our nations should have the right to speak to how they feel and push back on these leaders. But while you're under the Indian Act, it is designed in a way where it benefits the federal government more than it benefits us. So I kind of see both sides, where like, you kind of have to work with him, but at the same time, you want to send a message too.
Yeah, for sure. And do you think like the message would be basically that we're unhappy right now at this moment, and you need to work harder? Or do you think that the message was like, we don't want to work with you at all?
It's hard to say. One of the things I never want to do is put words in the mouths of any Indigenous leaders, or anyone for that matter. I don't know what their plan is with that, but at the same time, if you're going to send a message, it was a way of silent protesting at a nationally televised event. So it could have just been to send a message. It could have been, it was a form of silent protest. But who knows what the future is for those nations with Pierre.
Yeah. And one thing that I thought was interesting was that Pierre kind of promised a couple different things. He said, we're going to recognize nations' sovereignty. We're going to remove bureaucracy, red tape, which is kind of, it's a lot of words that really don't mean anything until you actually dig down into what that looks like. But one of the things that he had kind of mentioned was creating a revenue sharing stream with the nation, so that if they develop any resources, that they'd actually get money back from that. And I know that was something that was big from one of the panels that we saw at Canada Strong and Free, was something they were advocating for. Do you think that's something that has come from the nations, and that he is kind of bringing back, as saying like, here's my olive branch? Or do you what is your take on that?
I think that he has probably talked to quite a few. I know that he has talked to quite a few elected chiefs. And while, yes, resource development is very important, and you're going to find it easier for him to be in rooms with chiefs that are pro-resource development for that reason, that's also just one small piece. And what about our nations that are not pro-resource development, and they're very much land defenders, and they prioritize the land first, and they don't want any of our resources extracted from the ground?
Mm-hmm.
That's another hurdle he's going to have to overcome, because, I don't know more with Stephen Harper, where if you don't have a good consultation process in place, you're going to end up with a whole bunch of people across the country that are protesting against you. And like we heard over the course of AFN about the $42 billion funding announcement for child welfare, from what I've seen, I'm not all the way through the draft yet, is that it's over 10 years. So the Liberal government really strategically planned that, because if it gets into the next year's budget, by the summertime, the House rises and then the writ drops in the fall, we might not even see the start of that funding yet. So it's putting that responsibility back on Pierre Poilievre. And I am telling you right now, you are going to hear that as a campaign issue, because that is one of the biggest issues for nations right now that are asserting autonomy over child welfare, and they need that funding.
Right. And you kind of mentioned Stephen Harper there, so I think that's kind of like a nice segue to the fact that that was kind of one of the big complaints that we heard, was the fact that they said, Stephen Harper years were some of the worst that we actually experienced. What does that mean? Because as somebody who's not Indigenous, I'm not quite sure what that entails when they say like the Stephen Harper years were the worst years and we don't want that again. What was that they're specifically talking to?
I think it was multiple things. I would disagree, and I say this with a lot of humility and understanding that I am not in any way in an elected leadership role. I would not say it's some of the worst years, because by the Stephen Harper years, our people were out of some of the worst trenches of our history. The last residential school closed on my nation when I was a child. So I think, things were still ongoing, and we were seeing other crises like the drug epidemic, missing and murdered Indigenous women. Jordan's principle wasn't a thing until the mid 2000s. So there were obviously a lot of crises that we needed to deal with. But in terms of like the worst times or the worst periods of time with government, I would disagree, but in another way, in the fact that like it was already starting to get fairly progressive, and the majority of society, I think, was coming over to our side to understand our shared history and why we need to be prioritizing reconciliation in a really authentic way. And Stephen Harper wasn't moving with society as that was happening. Like consultation started being a big topic of conversation. Like you can't just ram pipelines through Indigenous territories across the country. And it was like, actually, we're going to do that. And we're actually going to introduce the Jobs and Growth Act while we do it. And it's like, yeah, no. And, like missing and murdered Indigenous women wasn't prioritized. Addiction strategies wasn't prioritized. And the water crisis wasn't even being touched. So there were a lot of large issues that his government wasn't really taking on. And he was sitting too much on his financial fence post and not moving from it. So I think that by that time, there was a lot of advocacy from our nations in Ottawa, but Harper wasn't open to listening to it.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
Yeah, it does make a lot of sense in terms of like that's even especially with that vote, what it's kind of allowed the ground to be fertile for Trudeau to step in. He was able to speak a lot of kind things and kind of win that vote over is what I see. And one thing I was curious about is because the situation happened at AFN, and with yourself, you've obviously you said it yourself. You have feet in two worlds, and you have to navigate politics of both worlds. When you started talking about these AFN issues, I started seeing some interesting conversation take place on social media. Where obviously you've in some degree have won a lot of favor with those in the conservative circles, but when you started speaking on behalf of your people, that's when I started seeing some like people come at you a little bit online, and like what's that been like? Kind of you navigating like people that support you because you have they agree with your viewpoints on things, but when it comes to Indigenous issues, all of a sudden it gets a little touchy. Like, how do you navigate that?
Yeah, in terms of Twitter, walking in two worlds, and there has obviously been a lot of misconceptions around Indigenous people that walk in two worlds. And although I exist politically, like, don't be surprised when I come out and tell you to lay off. And if you're acting racist and I push back and you're telling me it was so disrespectful that chiefs turn their back, why not? Like, why are you acting like our chiefs should bow down to a government that facilitates the Indian Act? Like, I understand walking in both worlds because, like I've said before, I live in an urban center. I have a mortgage on my house. Like, there are many, many things in mainstream Canadian society that affect me deeply. But at the same time, like, our elected leadership, in my eyes, are just as important as an elected MLA or an elected MP. That's our governance. That's our people. They're leading our tribes. Mm-hmm. And there's a reason they put on those war bonnets. They're the leaders of us. And so for people to come back at me and be like, oh, I think it was so disrespectful that they turned their back. It's like, what do you mean? And like people saying, well, maybe they should just talk and like try to work it out. It's like, we've been doing that. Like, guys, it is 2024. We still have an Indian Act. We still have land claims tied up in court. We're still seeing class action settlements that are, trying to address the past and our historical grievances. And you're going to sit there and be like, oh, they should just like talk it out. It's like, we've been trying to do that. Like, and I'm sorry. It's like, if you follow me because you like to tweet that I was critical of Justin Trudeau, but the next day you get mad at me because I defend our sovereignty and I defend our leadership's right to defend our sovereignty and demand that government respects them, then really I'm probably not the person for you, because I'm not worried about saying what's popular. I'm not worried about saying the thing that's going to get the most followers. I'm worried about sticking true to how I feel about things and my morals and my teachings. And if I lose, 100 followers for saying don't be racist on a post, then so be it.
And something you kind of mentioned there about being into Canada with the Indian Act. Are you able to unpack that a little bit? I know we don't want to take like a whole, that could be a whole episode in itself, but just like very like high level. Cause this was something that, cause as I've said before, my wife being Indigenous, her mother and I kind of talked about this quite a bit, about the idea of like, what does a Canada without the Indian Act look like? And she was saying like, she's like, I hate the Indian Act, but at the same time, it guarantees that the reserve land stays with the native peoples. And if we remove the Indian Act, then basically all that land is up for grabs for Canada to come and take. And there's valuable resources under that. And we've already been moved a couple of times off of, you know, the prime land that we had owned and lived on for millennia. And now they've moved us sometimes to like, she was speaking specifically about Ontario natives, and she's like, we've been moved into the Ring of Fire, and now there's precious minerals under the ground, so now they want the land again. And so she was like, as much as I hate the Indian Act, like we needed to protect the land that we have. So I'm wondering, like, what is your take on the Indian Act and a Canada post-Indian Act?
First of all, you were like, hey, we'll just get you on for like 15 minutes. And then now you're like, hey, how do you feel about the Indian Act? Like, what? I'm like, do I type into ChatGPT how to sum up the Indian Act in like 3 minutes? That is a very high level conversation. And I will admit, I am not skilled or versed enough in Indigenous law to understand, but I do have friends that are Indigenous lawyers that are in the background working on Indigenous law so that we have our own law systems and our own, like, our own institutions, basically. Because you're right, like, the Indian Act in itself is a colonial oppressive document, but at the same time, it's our legal binding document with the Crown. Like, that's how we, at the end of the day, are not given what we're owed, but that's the accountability piece. And but I hold our treaties to the highest regard. Like, to me, that was our agreements. Okay.
Well, last thing then, and we'll let you get back to your day because I know you've been busy. Basically, one of the things that Poilievre had promised, basically new funding agreements to support the development of housing and new mortgage arrangements. Is like, what does that look like for folks? Like, I know that the housing crisis is probably affecting the population as much or more than the general population in Canada. So I'm wondering, what does that mean for you folks? Is that something that folks are going to be looking to and saying, yeah, this is a really good policy, we really want to see this? Or is this just more like placating words?
It's hard to say. I don't really know any specifics around that policy that he's announced, but I know there's been conversation around switching up the housing policies, especially on nations, because as it is right now, like, you don't really own your home and you can't buy land and you can't mortgage a house on land you don't own. But there has been ways around that. Like, there's nations in Vancouver where you have like 99-year leases, and that's kind of how you get around it to get mortgages on that land. So if he came in and kind of figured that way out, because there are First Nations people across the country that will mortgage their own houses on their nations. And not only would that help with the housing crisis, but it would also help with the health issue as well. Because when you have overcrowding, that leads to many, many different types of health issues, especially in northern remote communities. So yeah, I all around, I think that is definitely an area that has to be addressed.
Cool.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for taking the time to dive into that. And I know we charted into some territory that we'll have to take more time to actually do justice and speak with some folks who are really well-versed in that, so that we can do a proper deep dive and do a good justice to that. But I appreciate you coming on and talking to us.
Absolutely.
No problem.
And we hope you have your good night, and take care of your dog, Lennon. So,
well, thank you.
No problem. Have a good one. Boom! Let's go. That's the information we're looking for out here. That was fantastic. Well, we are always a pleasure to have Jennifer L. on with us. And we move on to our next segment here. Well, Mr. Jagmeet Singh saying we should have a cap on food prices in this country. If we didn't have enough red tape as it is, we need more of it because we care about the people. And that came out this week.
I know. And it's so funny because, like, your initial reaction a lot of times is like, yeah, the price of food is too damn high. We need to bring that down. We need to stop it before it goes out of control. And just like we've seen rent control work so well in so many places, let's not. Right. But what was interesting is, so he's calling for this price cap on food. And he said that this is part of his plan as the party that is going to save Canada. I'm like, dude,
nice.
What are you doing?
NDP is going to save Canada. Let's go. Yeah, that's a great joke.
Yeah, and so his proposal is basically, he says, this is all corporate greed from large grocery chains. It's definitely nothing to do with the fact that we've destroyed our economy and the dollar that we have is worth so much less than it actually is. But anyway, I digress.
Oh yeah.
But he says that penalties for price fixing and giving more power to the Competition Bureau to tackle anti-competitive practices is the way we need to go. And so this is the problem, is there is a nugget of truth to that, because we look at the bread pricing situation that we had, where they were actually charged $50 million for knowingly fixing the price on bread. And they said the same thing is happening with meat. We know that they're colluding and that they're actually creating a lack of competition in the market so they can fix the price of that. And you know who's not seeing the benefit of that? The farmers, the producers, the suppliers.
Of course.
And so I look at that and I go, yeah, there's some truth to that. I agree. But then when he starts going into the profit margins and he starts going into the fact that like we need to actually find out the value of every single item and then cap it at that, I'm like, dude, you're the one supporting a carbon tax that is basically creating this inflation on food because now the suppliers have to raise their prices because they have to pay for the increases in gas that they need. And farmers right now are already stretched to the maximum on profitability for these products. Like half of them are saying like it's not even worth it. They're in the negative now to produce, which is not what we want. Yeah. That doesn't actually bring down prices, because then you lose people. You have less competition overall. You have less people putting goods and services into the market. So then those few items that we have now become more scarce. Demand goes up. You know the story. So Mr. Singh, it's like, what are you doing? And then he blasts, he says, the Liberals and Conservatives. And so one thing that I thought that was interesting too was he actually mentioned the fact that the Liberals, which by the way, he's keeping in power. We need to make sure we say that.
Remind the people.
Yeah, exactly. The fact that the Liberals gave $25.5 million to Loblaws and Costco between 2019 and 2013.
Let's go.
And what did they use it for?
Refrigerators.
Oh, yeah. It was part of the low carbon economy fund.
Woo!
Good old climate change gets brought in again. So this was money that Loblaws and Costco needed so that they could have a green transition, because those companies are definitely not making enough money to do it on their own. And so I'm looking at this and I'm like, this is more climate change BS that we're seeing right here.
Yeah.
Like, what dinner did Trudeau attend with lobbyists from these organizations? And he thought, you know, it would be really great if you just, cut the amount that we have to pay in taxes this year by 25 million so that we can buy new refrigerators that are going to be more energy efficient. Yeah. And he's like, that sounds great. That's going to be less carbon and we're going to solve climate change. And we should do it with taxpayer dollar. So Jagmeet highlighting this has two things for me. I'm like, yes, thank you for bringing that up. Important to mention that. Two, what are you actually going to do about it right now? Because you have the most power that you're ever going to have within the next 20 years, right at this very moment. And you're not using it. And you expect us to then elect you as leader? God, no. You have all the power right now and you're not doing anything with it. You could dissolve Parliament if you want to. You don't. Yeah. Because we know why. You want that pension.
You want that money. Yeah, so this is the issue I have with this. And any politician in this country who dares bring any ideas in this vicinity up, the government needs to get involved in the market to make it more fair. That's it. Run the other way. This is why we're in this mess in the first place of Canada. We have no competition. Competition levels out prices. When you have 2 or 3 players in the country, this is what happens. And the only person or the only entity saving the customer from these big corporations is the government? That's who's going to save us? Not going to happen. And this has been the long standing issue in Canada. We just don't have the practices in place that invite competition in the country. If you just did that, and I get it, population, I get that happens. There's a reason why Ontario has probably the most competitive prices in the country. It's because of the saturation of the population in Southern Ontario. But like, it would be nice if some of these government officials were just like wanted to invite more competition into the country. Right now, there's only one party, and on a good day, who does it, and that's the Conservative Party. The other two won't do it, and I'm saying on a good day, the Conservative government will do it. They are not great when it comes to this stuff either. This is just the Canadian way. We'll rely on the government again. We'll just there's like one of my mentors who was doing a entrepreneurship class at York University. When he asked his class, what would it take to have more entrepreneurs in this country? They said, well, you just need more investment into entrepreneurship. And he's like, what? No, go make it yourself. You're begging the government so we can make more entrepreneurs. That is the problem with Canadians, and that is the problem with the mentality of this country for the past however long. It's crazy.
Yeah. And I totally agree. I think less government hands into business, the better.
Yeah.
I mean, the government is not supposed to create jobs. The government is not supposed to create business. The government is not supposed to do all of that. The government is supposed to stay out of the way and make sure that the citizens are protected from predatory business. But where's the government on things like cash money loans? They don't care about like protecting the person, the average person, from predatory business.
No.
You know, like the fact that we have so many things in our food supply right now that are completely banned in all of the EU and in other countries like Australia and New Zealand, which have very good healthcare systems because they've realized that maybe forever chemicals shouldn't be in our products, but, you know, not in Canada. So when I look at this, I think about basically what we saw happen with all the premiers who gathered in Nova Scotia the other day. I got kicked out of my workplace because they all decided to use our workplace as their meeting spot, as they do, which is kind of fun. But what I'm getting at here is the fact that they said the message to the federal government is stay in your lane, do your job. You're not doing the job that you're supposed to do. And that's how I feel about this. Get out of this. Get out of business. You're not a business. You're not business consultants. You shouldn't be doing this. Your job is to make sure that business is not predatory to consumers. And what you're doing is the exact opposite. Like you said, by eliminating competition, you create massive oligopolies or monopolies who are controlling everything and can just jack that price up little by little. So maybe they'll say, oh, we're going to tie it to inflation. That's still going to be prices increasing year over year. And then what happens when those price increases don't meet the actual demands of the farmers or the consumers? Like, it's a mess. It's an absolute mess. And you're totally right. It creates less competition. It just brings power into a more concentrated set of hands. And it's the worst. The worst.
I mean, I've been told that that's a good thing. Is concentrated power into a select few hands, I think, is just a brilliant idea. It goes well every time it happens.
I know, because that way you will own nothing and be happy.
Oh, do you know what I was really happy about the other day? I'm going to share this because I think this will trigger you, and I love it. I was out on Grand Lake the other day boating around, and we drove by the CEO of Amira's house cottage on the lake, and I was like, "Ooh, that's nice." Wow, it must be nice to be CEO of Amira these days, you know? So
yeah,
fun.
And it was only a couple months ago that he was begging Ottawa for handouts so that they could make their adjustments because Fiona was so bad.
Oh,
like it
yeah.
just it's right. It's the culture in Canada is that you have a few corporations who control absolutely everything, and then when they need to do any kind of investment at all into their own business, they go into the Canadian taxpayers, and they get the money from that to do investments in their own business. Like, disgusting.
Classic.
And they talk about this is something that I was thinking about, and correct me if I'm wrong, Josh, but when we talk about the drop in Canadian productivity, something that drives productivity is competition.
Yep.
Having multiple businesses competing to get your dollar and to get your business is going to drive productivity, because that's going to drive new innovative ways of doing things. It's going to drive new innovative products. It's going to drive investment into the workforce so that they are the best at what they do. That's how productivity is increased in this country. I've been seeing so many headlines now about Canada and the government, how the government needs to be funding productivity. I'm like, what? What?
Yeah.
Because, government workers are known to be the most productive. Saying as a government worker.
True.
But
yeah, I mean, that you're right. And people want to live for something. We talked about at the beginning of the show, people want purpose. A purposeless life leads to lack of productivity. So yeah, more competition gets people more fired up, get more engaged in what they're doing, get more pride in who they are and what they're doing with their craft is really important to a country. And we will get that back. I am confident with it, man. As much as it's been a scary past week, I've seen the resolve in people wake up too. I'm like, oh baby. The people who are wanting to be in control and really consolidate power right now, they're shaking. They're scared. And the regular person's going to stand up. And I'm so proud of my fellow Canadians and Americans who are going to stand up against this tyranny. I'm over it. And let's go, boys and girls and everybody else.
I love the inclusion at the end.
Let's go. There you go.
Oh, man. Well, I think that leads us well into our wild card, because that was wild.
Yeah.
And I have one this week.
Let's
that
go.
You haven't seen.
I'm looking forward to this.
What's funny is that, so when we do this, I usually burn up all my wild cards because I've been sending them to Josh the whole week, being like, oh, look at this. This is funny. And so this week I was like, I'm going to show some restraint. I'm going to hold back. I'm going to keep them all back. And then I was like, oh crap, what one was it that I was supposed to send them? But we'll see if you enjoy this one.
All right, baby. I'm looking forward to this.
The song of the summer.
So this guy made a huge mistake. Now, I'm not gonna lie, he probably made the happiest, most positive song in the world. The only problem is he let the world hear it, and well,
I wanna get high on love. I wanna get drunk on laughter. I wanna get high on love. I wanna do shots of moonlight.
I'm not sure what he learned from this experience, but I learned I'm not the funniest person on the internet.
I think I just wrote the...
Those comments are savage, dude.
I know. My favorite one on there was, this sounds like oat milk. There was another one, it was Gaylor Swift.
Gaylor Swift.
I was like, oh my God. People are ruthless, and I love it.
The comment section is ruthless. It is filled with bots, but there are some original thoughts in there from time to time.
Yeah.
Oh, gee.
The comment, you ruined my summer. And you know what? Like, this person, like, they're probably just doing their thing, and they're like, positivity, you're gonna spread it, and then like, they shared it with the internet, and the internet just ripped it apart.
Shoot. Oh boy, yeah,
we're
singing in gay minor. Oh gosh.
Oh no.
Well, I will say this. This was not planned for the show, but this reminded me of it. It was crazy time because so much crap happened this past week. I forgot to share about this. But like, it is crazy the timing of us talking about Sketch last week, and then all that information about his past comes out. Like literally, it came literally 15 minutes after we went off air. It was crazy how quick. I was like, did that just happen? That's wild. And his apology was amazing. I did not have sexual relations with that man. Just kidding, I did. And he just kind of went off. And since then, he's gone through his stuff. He's given his quote unquote apology video, which wasn't necessary, but he's doing what he feels is right for him. But since he's now been streaming since, and it's been amazing. Like he's just leaning into all of it now and just like cracking all the jokes. We're here for it.
Well, you know what they say, the truth will set you free.
The truth will set you free, baby. Shout out Sketch, baby. We are here for it. Yeah, there's some things he's already been saying. I was like, gee. Yeah. So anyways, I got my wild card for you, big boy. So it's quick, but it's good. All right.
Okay.
So those who are listening via audio, just embrace for what you're about to listen to.
I'm also so proud of myself that I didn't say that's what she said.
The internet has been in an uproar since finding out that Rosa Parks' husband had a car.
Wait. Hold on.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
Dude, I caught that one night. I lost it. It took me so long to like, wait, what?
The internet strikes again.
Yeah, it really does.
The internet is in an uproar. That Rosa Parks' husband had a car. So simple. Like you said, short and sweet.
Yeah.
It was impactful.
Yeah, we're here for the impacts, man.
Yeah.
Holy jumping. Great show, y'all. We were happy you joined us. I'm glad that we fought through all the technical issues. We're doing a later show. Thank you for sticking with us and tuning in on a Thursday to listen to us, hear us out. We told you it'd be worth it. We hope you found it worth it. We're grateful for all of you so much. So whatever it is you're doing, whether you be watching Donald Trump's RNC address,
writing mean comments on videos,
or just, sitting back having a cold one, maybe relaxing from all the craziness in the world. Whatever it is you're doing, wherever you are, we love you. We're out. Peace.
I'm also here for those mean comments.